1968 National League Rookie of the Year, Skyline Chili Connoisseur, two-time National League MVP, Cat Dad, 10 consecutive Gold Gloves, 10 Grand Slams, the most ever by a catcher, Spray Paint Ambassador, Hunting Advice Guy, the driver of the Big Red Machine, two-time World Series champion, comedian for the troops, that guy from Hee Haw, 1976 World Series MVP, 1996 pretty decent golfer, innovator of his position, innovator of children's television, the first athlete on a Wheaties box, 14-time All-Star, 14-time critic of Pete Rose, 14-time husband, the face of baseball for a decade, first ballot Hall of Famer, a statue at Great American Ballpark. The reality is, this could have all just been a small-town kid's unattained dream. None of this would have happened if Johnny Bench didn't cheat death. Twice. Johnny Bench was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma on December 7, 1947. His family would relocate to the small town of Binger, where Johnny's dad, Ted, a truck driver by trade but always a ball player at heart, would sponsor and coach Johnny's Little League teams, even driving the team 2 games in his truck. Growing up arguably the biggest fan of fellow Oklahoma superstar Mickey Mantle, Johnny adopted the confident mindset of, if he can do it, why can't I? Eventually introducing himself to coaches and teachers as a future big leaguer and meticulously practicing his autograph after receiving a C in penmanship. Ted believed the catcher position was the best ticket to the big leagues, so that's where Johnny wanted to be from day one. He was a 2-sport star at Binger High School in basketball and baseball, of course, as well as class valedictorian. I assume he viewed this speech as practice for his Hall of Fame speech, with his unwavering determination. The speech also touched on the tragedy he experienced firsthand when the Binger baseball team's bus lost its brakes, rode the guardrail for what seemed like an eternity, and rolled down a 50-foot ravine. 2 of his teammates were killed in the crash. Johnny Bench was knocked unconscious, but otherwise unscathed. Johnny Bench was selected by the Cincinnati Reds 36th overall in the 1965 amateur draft. He suited up for the Single-A Peninsula Grays in Hampton, Virginia. He received Carolina League Player of the Year honors. At the conclusion of the season, he pointed his 65 Ford Fairlane back toward Binger and wound up in a scary collision with a drunk driver. He was hospitalized and received 27 stitches in his head, but yet again, he managed to not sustain any injuries that threatened his baseball career. While with the AAA Buffalo Bisons in 1967, he hit a grand slam off of Orioles Hall of Fame pitcher Jim Palmer, another insane car wreck survivor, by the way, who at the time was a 20-year-old already wearing his first World Series ring. The significance of this grand slam was it was the only one he gave up his entire professional career, never surrendering one in the majors. Johnny Bench got his call-up shortly after, and though he got off to a slow start with the bat, his abilities behind the plate caught the eye of the immortal Ted Williams, who signed a bat for him that said, "Use this to break into an Arizona cryogenics lab in 2023, defrost my head, and take it back to San Diego." Just kidding, that escalated. He actually wrote, "To a Hall of Famer for sure." Ted didn't miss often. He didn't miss with this one. In 1968, Johnny Bench's first full season would put all other catchers in the National League on notice. He batted .275 with 15 home runs and 82 RBIs, but his defensive play was in a league of its own. He became the first rookie catcher to win the NL Gold Glove Award and was named NL Rookie of the Year. From his strong yet agile frame to his cartoonishly big hands to being a savant at calling games and natural leadership skills, he was born to play behind the plate, which he did 154 times that season. He made 102 assists that year, which a catcher hadn't achieved in 23 years. You don't run on Johnny. In 1969, he started his first All-Star game, hitting a home run early and getting robbed of another one in this tremendous play by Carl Yastrzemski. Bench served in the United States Army Reserve, making him a natural choice to embark on Bob Hope's USO tour of Vietnam in the winter of 1970. He returned to Cincinnati to have his best statistical season, his age 22 season, where he would become the youngest player in history to win the MVP award. He batted .293 with 45 home runs and 148 RBIs, good for a Reds franchise record. The Reds would lead the National League in batting average that season, but their pitching would be exposed by the Baltimore Orioles in the 1970 World Series. Bench would win the MVP award again in 1972, and true to form, the Reds supergroup would make a strong push to the postseason, winning their division by 10.5 games. Bench enjoyed one of his countless all-time clutch-hitting moments in that year's National League Championship game against the Pirates with this opposite field jack. The Reds would fall to the Oakland A's in 7 games in the World Series. After this season, Bench, who was young, healthy, and didn't smoke, had a growth removed from his lung. This would be a cause for speculation in the news, but Bench continued to be an unwavering force behind home plate. In 1975, a year that sports historians unanimously agree was the peak of Pete Rose's haircut, Bench got the best seat in the house to watch Tony Perez send the Spaceman, Bill Lee's jet-lagged eephus into orbit, and the Big Red Machine won it all in dramatic fashion against the Boston Red Sox. This season, as opposed to focusing on Bench's lung, the press wrote about his heart. The eligible bachelor was regularly photographed with some of the time's most famous actresses. He'd marry Miss South Carolina runner-up Vicki Lynn Chesser, whom he'd called up after seeing her in a toothpaste commercial. They'd fail to last a calendar year. The Reds would return to the World Series in 1976, sweeping the Yankees in a series where Bench would see his name in the paper for comments manager Sparky Anderson made when asked about the matchup between Bench and Thurman Munson. Anderson responded that it wasn't fair to compare any catcher to Johnny Bench. Both catchers would be the offensive catalyst for their respective teams. Bench batted .533, Munson batted .529. Munson would tragically die in the aftermath of a plane crash less than 3 years later. Bench's last remarkable season was 1977. His statistical decline seemed to mirror the gradual dissolve of the machine. Sparky Anderson, Tony Perez, Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, and others would find their way onto other rosters, as Johnny stayed a constant in Cincinnati. Bench's body was also basically held together by duct tape and prayers at this point, sporting a total of 6 broken bones in each foot, a right thumb that had been broken twice, and compounding shoulder and back injuries from collisions at home plate. Playing in pain was more than his reputation, it was his identity.
You're a tough son of a bitch. I am.
In the 80s, Bench would remain in the batting order, but field the corner infield positions in an attempt to stay healthy. He announced his retirement in the 1983 season, culminating in Johnny Bench Day at Riverfront Stadium on September 29th, where he'd hit a pinch hit 2-run single, be pinch run for, schedule a hip replacement, and start his gradual fade out of the game. Though many theorized Johnny Bench would be an excellent manager, he seemed he'd had his fill, pursuing his golf career instead and keeping baseball at arm's length with the exception of teaching the old baseball bunch a thing or two alongside the Chicken and Tommy Lasorda as recurring characters. I could definitely pontificate about this show for its own entire video at some point. If that's something you guys would be interested in, let me know in the comments. The Baseball Bunch enjoyed a very fitting 5 seasons on the air, catching several Emmys. Johnny Bench would be voted into the Baseball Hall of Fame at the very young age of 41 in 1989, but his induction was somewhat overshadowed by Pete Rose's gambling scandal, which, as most of you know, Bench was very outspoken about his disapproval of Rose's actions. Johnny Bench's legacy is everywhere you look in baseball to this day. His career defined the era he played in, and it's still a measuring stick to which we compare young stars, and even 40 years after his retirement. Bench's personality, where he walked a fine line between pride and humility, mirrors the way his career walked a fine line between a pop culture icon in one space and a hard-nosed stalwart in the other, the space of baseball. No matter who you are, there's something about Johnny you can wholeheartedly identify with. There's not another position in baseball where there's only one definitive answer to who did it best. Johnny Bench is the best catcher to ever play baseball.